welcome to African Women to Watch. I'm Uche Okoronkwo. Now, women make up more than half of the workforce in financial institutions globally, but only 19% are in senior positions, a mere 14% hold board seats, and just 2% are CEOs. That's according to a 2013 study by global research firm PricewaterhouseCoopers. Now, coming up on the show today, we look at Africa's progress in diversifying leadership in the financial sector and the continent's efforts to encourage financial inclusion for women. We speak to Uganda's Finance Minister Maria Kiwanuka, who's using her experience as a successful businesswoman to encourage a new ethic in government spending. We speak to Nigeria's Stanbic IBT CEO Shola David-Borha, and she tells us how she rose through the company ranks before taking on the top job. And Suad Ben Bashir, a pioneer of investment banking in Morocco, has established herself as a strong presence in the country's business and investment landscape. After working for a decade at the World Bank in Washington and 11 years as a businesswoman in Uganda, Maria Kiwanuka became the country's second female finance minister in 2011. She built her reputation in government not as a politician, but as a business-savvy leader.
You have to put in the power, you need to put in the irrigation because we're an agricultural country, and the ICT networks. For instance, you need the roads to connect the centers of production to the markets, to lower the cost of transport and to bring the inputs to the production centers. You need the roads you need the transport to ensure better velocity of labor across the region. You need power to power all the modern industries, whether it's agro-processing, whether it's light manufacturing, whether it's steel, whether it's just a little computer internet cafe. You need power, reliable power. So roads, because we're a land-linked country, roads, rail, power, water, and irrigation. And that way, you may spend the money under the Ministry of Transport or the Ministry of Energy, but it's actually benefiting those people who reside in the agricultural sector, or the local government sector, or the rural development sector, depending how you look at it.
Are you concerned about economic growth not filtering down to the layperson and ensuring that it tackles inequality and poverty levels?
Well, we've certainly had a good stab at it so far. We have met our first Millennium Development Goal, which is halving the number of people living under the poverty threshold. So it dropped from 58% in the early 90s to now under 19%. But of course, you have to make sure that having climbed out of poverty, they don't tip back. That's why you have to give them opportunities to improve their productivity at the household level, to improve their skills development at the household level, which is a basic unit of economic production. So again, we go back to put in the roads, put in the power, put in the irrigation, provide the skills training, and then they as individuals and as households can do the rest.
What kind of leadership qualities would you say are required in order to ensure that a country's finances are managed efficiently?
You need to be focused. You need to be seen maybe sometimes as not very responsive, because people say, oh, we need money for this, we need money for that. You say, yes, but if the budget which you passed says we do this. We need to put in the roads, we need to put in the power, and in turn, we must make sure we pledge to the people that we will spend their money efficiently.
Maria is not new to Ugandan business circles. Following her 10-year stint at the World Bank, she returned to her homeland in early 2000 as managing director and majority owner of 2 Ugandan radio stations. She says her experiences in the private sector taught her to grow the purse.
It has been pretty useful to me, my private sector experience coming into government, because you come in with the knowledge and experience that you have to pay the rent. You have to make ends meet. And that is something that increasingly across Africa, and especially in Uganda, the government is trying to be sort of much more private sector oriented in order to fit in with the private sector, which accounts for 80% of our output. So it's a case of saying the private sector, we know you're the engine of growth. What do we need to do to help you run faster? And so government is not the be-all and end-all. It's in a supportive role, and of course it plays a regulatory function as well. And that is something you can really resonate with if you've been in the private sector.
You mentioned that you were in media and of course in radio. How did you get to that point?
Oh, it was great fun. By the way, radio stations are still in operation. They're still continuing, because I always used to say to my staff, nobody is indispensable. And it seems it applies to me as well, because the station's doing just fine without me for the last 3 years. One is a music station, great songs, great memories. It plays oldies, but we prefer to call them memories. And then the other one is a vernacular news talk sports station, and that's in our local vernacular.
It's interesting, you've got an economic background, of course you've got a BCom degree. Why get into radio when you did?
Because there's a gap in the market. There's a gap in the market for contemporary music, what you call oldies or adult contemporary music, hits of the past. Because when private radio started in Uganda, it was all about hip hop, urban, pop, cutting edge, shock jock kind of thing. And there's no one, the oldies were not glamorous. Yeah. And no one listened to the oldies. But when you check with people of that age group, they said, yes, we'd love to hear the music that we grew up listening to. So that's how we came into being with Radio 1, a gap in the market.
A lot of people say that once you get into radio, it's really difficult to leave because you fall in love with it. Did you have that experience as well?
It sort of gets into you, and it's a much more personal media than any other media, because radio speaks to you as an individual, unlike TV, unlike print, unlike even the social media.
Well, you've worked at various institutions, including the World Bank and, of course, the private sector as well. How has that shaped your thoughts and your career into becoming a finance minister in Uganda?
Well, when I was in the World Bank as what they call a young professional, and brought in as a management trainee, so of course you didn't have anything much to compare against. So let me say, coming back into contact with the bank after 15 years, I can see there's been a lot of progress, both in the bank and the IMF. They're much more in a listening mode. There's no cookie cutter solutions across continents or across sectors. As they deal with the countries or the sectors now on a much more individual basis, they listen, they don't prescribe, they suggest, and basically I think it's a much more healthy relationship.
Maria launched Radio 1 at the turn of the century, when Uganda's airways were dominated by 3 stations, all headed up by men. Until her nomination as minister, this wife and mother of 2 was also a board member at the Ugandan Development Bank, a non-executive director at Stanbic Bank, and a member of the Presidential Economic Commission.
I think every woman has to listen for that voice inside her, whether to become a career woman or to become a homemaker, whether when or if to have children, because that's another thing people talk about. And when you're pressing against a glass ceiling, what do? Again, you have to look inside yourself.
After the break, Nigeria's Shola David Borha shares her climb to the top of one of the country's largest financial institutions. Welcome back. After spending 2 decades in various positions within Stanbic IBTC, Shola David Borha became one of Nigeria's highest paid CEOs when she took the helm of the bank's holding company in May 2011.
I knew what I didn't want to do in life. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do medicine, though my father wanted me to do it. And I stumbled, like I said, on economics, went down that path. And when I was studying in Manchester, I did some courses in banking and finance, which was quite interesting. And I wanted to come back to Nigeria. Had no interest in staying on in the UK. And when I came back, my sister had a friend who worked in Nile Merchant Bank. That friend happened to be Mr. Tedo Peterside. And so she arranged an appointment for me to go and talk to him and chat with him, talk about career prospects. And I subsequently applied for a job there, among other banking institutions I was applying to, and I got a job and started work in the credit and marketing department of Now Merchant Bank. And Now was the pioneer merchant bank in Nigeria at the time.
Shola's long history with Stanbic IBTC began when current chairman Atedo Peterside asked her to join the investment banking and trust company as one of its foundation staff in the late 1980s.
It's very interesting, the early years. You had to prove yourself, you had to, fight for every kind of business you could get. But it was an experience I wouldn't exchange, because you learn many things on that journey. I remember when we first approached Shell to try and do business, and Shell said, no, they don't talk to any institution that can't produce 3 years audited accounts. And we thought they were such a mean lot. But they were quite right, because in the 3 years that the institution, survived, many of our peers who at the time were also given banking licenses folded up. After various discussions with different institutions, we merged with Chartered Bank and a smaller commercial bank as well, to form IBTC Chartered Bank. That merger took place in December 2005. Subsequent to that, the Standard Bank Group, who also had a small commercial bank in Nigeria and who also had to recapitalize, or their license would have been withdrawn, were also looking, to acquire a Nigerian bank to expand their presence in the country. And so discussions started, and by September 2007, we went through another merger with Stanbic Bank. So it was pretty challenging, having to go through the different merger transactions and the attendant integration issues.
At the time of joining IBTC, there were a large number of women participating in Nigeria's banking sector, but very few took on senior level positions. Though the industry has evolved over the last 20 years, Shola says that her quick rise to the top was encouraged early on because IBTC chose to be different.
In IBTC, we actually had women in senior level positions. We were an outlier to the industry. So the rest of the banking industry didn't have as many women in senior positions, though you had sizable number of women at the entry level, because those are sort of fresh graduates. What we saw in the 80s, the late 80s, the early 90s, were women who are either on the boards in a non-executive capacity and minorities, or you had a few senior managers and general management staff.
Now, you took on a lot of roles throughout your career, sometimes 2 roles at the same time. How did you juggle all of this?
It's complex when you look at it from the outside, okay, but it kind of evolved. So when things are evolving, you get a chance to adapt as they are evolving. Okay, so the complexity is less, when you're going through that process than if you just kind of come into a mature structure. But, I'd say by the grace of God and really just focusing on the job, that's what you're being paid for. So, there's a job to do and you do it. And, I've been blessed with having very competent managers to support me, very competent in their own fields, in their own areas of expertise. So, you delegate as much as you can, and you focus on the strategic and the big pictures.
Now, when you were Deputy CEO and Head of Investment Banking of Stanbic, the bank expanded its reach across sub-Saharan Africa. What was it like for you as someone who was primarily experienced in Nigerian banking only?
I got to travel to many African countries that I'd never been before, meet, very competent teams of Africans, working in different countries. And it was interesting to talk to different clients, some who are local to particular countries, some who had a Pan-African presence, and to be able to explain to them what the Standard Bank Group's offering to them is, and basically try and track the level of business we're doing across countries and manage the relationship. So I found it very exciting, and it has been actually one of the best parts of my career.
Shola says her biggest achievement was being part of a management team that grew IBTC into one of the leading financial services players in Nigeria.
I believe, what I look back on and I'm very happy about is the privilege of being able to leave a legacy of an institution that is one of the leading or the thought leaders on this continent, is innovative and is run by Africans and run in a manner that is ethical and is focused on the long term.
What would you say is your leadership style?
I think every leader has to be patient. I'm still working on it, but because you have to be able to watch people grow, you have to allow people to make mistakes and know when to intervene, and when to watch. My leadership style is, I like working as a team. I believe that teams and groups of people achieve things, not individuals. I also operate a very informal structure, so everybody calls me Shola. And it's a flat structure as well. I think bureaucracy is an excuse for people to hide incompetence and also to do things that are not right. So people build barriers around themselves, which don't help the organization. So I have very open leadership style and really like having candid discussions that talk about the real issues so we can try and solve problems.
What advice would you have for any young woman who would like to take on the same path that you did?
It's important that you are willing, you have the right attitude. If you're asked to do something different, you don't dismiss it immediately. You try it. And what happens many times with women is that because an opportunity doesn't really look like what they want, they reject it. But, life is never that simple where what you want comes to you immediately. And I don't believe that any experience is wasted.
After the break, we speak to Suad Ben Bashir, a game changer in the Moroccan financial sector. Welcome back. Now, the economic participation of Arab women is the lowest in the world. The United Nations reports that only a third of women 15 years or older are active in the economy, compared to the world average of just over half. Morocco is working on improving this and recently implemented a gender-responsive budget and constitution that allows women equal social, economic, and political rights. Suad Ben Bashir is one of Morocco's leading business women, pioneering a number of changes in the financial sector. After graduating from French business school ESSEC in 1992, she joined Goldman Sachs in London. But just 3 years later, Suad decided to move back home, joining one of the country's top investment banks, CFG. She became CEO in 2009 and encouraged a new way of doing business that opened doors for more women to join the investment banking fraternity.
When I came back to Morocco to join CFG, which is a local investment bank, it was a very small investment bank, And they came from Goldman Sachs, where I think out at that time out of 120 partners, there were 3 women. So I came from a very male environment. And when CFG developed, we were very surprised to see how attractive we were to women. And today we're half, the company is not only me, but the company is really having 50% of its 150 employees being women at all levels. And what's the reason for that? I think there are two reasons. First of all is we have an Anglo-Saxon culture, and we're one of the very first companies in Morocco to bring these values of meritocracy, of non-formal way of doing business. So it attracted women because they need to express themselves in an environment that can hear them. And the second reason is maybe the model, the fact that I existed, showed the model to another one. We have now at the customs, at the police, at all levels, bus drivers, we have women. It changed the attitude of men, even in the street, towards women. Because women with authority, just to give an example, and the whole attitude will change.
In 2012, Souad was appointed to the board of the General Confederation of Moroccan Companies. She also received an award from King Mohammed for her contribution to the development of the country.
It was a surprise. I received this during, it was a throne ceremony, and we were 15 young persons in the economic world, it's young leaders if you want, and we thought we were invited just to see the king and to shake hands, and so we received this merit trophy, and it was fantastic. I'm very proud because I'm proud I actually left a European career to come back to Morocco. It was not because of money, it was because I'm involved in what's happening in my country. So I was very happy to be rewarded for that. It was an honor. In my CFG work, I really was involved in important projects for Morocco, and to have this dimension on top of just doing business, but to see a highway built. We structured the finance, and then I see a highway. I structure a tourism project, and then I see tourists coming. That was very interesting, and I think what I did well is just follow this passion.
And as a woman doing business in Morocco's corporate world, Souad accepts that it is hard to find a balance.
I really tried several ways to make work more flexible for women working with me, and we're now finding there are some recipes that don't work. I mean, half time, for example, for our industry doesn't work, but there's some others that work, like working from home. Like we can adapt, and I think each company has to find, depending on its own business, to find a model.
Thank you for joining us on this edition of African Women to Watch. You can watch this episode again or catch up on previous shows at www.bloombergtvafrica.com. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, till next time, goodbye.